it's me, we're back here for the very first time with, well, I guess it's for the second time with Kid Icarus Uprising, or the 28th time, or something like that. But with the Kid Icarus Uprising boss tier list. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's something new about me. I plucked my eyebrows. Yes, thank you for noticing. No, but seriously, new headphones. As usually happens with new headphones, I'm completely unused to the way the acoustics in this thing work, and every time I speak, it's like deafening. I can hear my own voice reverberate through it. So I'm sorry if I now and again I go like, and I like generally react weirdly to the sound of my own voice, because it's honestly like there's a speech jammer going on here. It's every time I speak, it's just like, so this might not be the ideal headphones for recording in the future, but maybe I'll just have them like half off like this so I can actually hear my voice. Now, I'll try and get used to it. So we recently completed Kid Icarus Uprising, and one of the best parts about that game was the crazy boss fights you get into all the time. So I thought it would be good and proper fun if we put them in a tier list. Starting with D tier, the easiest, with
it's a piece of cake.
C tier for
Hungry for a hot plate of punishment.
B tier for
Could really put a hurt on someone.
A tier for
Just about the sickest thing I've ever heard.
And S tier for
the top of my to-kill list!
I'm judging them mostly on how hard they were for me to beat, rather than how hard I think they are objectively for any build to beat. Me and my build, how much trouble we had with them is what I'm ranking them by here. And we're going in no discernible order that I can see, because it's like sort of alphabetical, but then sort of not the way the files decided to upload. Who cares? Let's start with Amazon Pandora. This is the rematch you have with Pandora in Chapter 22, Broken Feathers, where she's kind of guarding the... Well, she's not guarding it. She jumps out of Dark Pit's swings to try and take the Fountain of Youth from him, basically. Yeah, I'm gonna wear them like half off my face like this. I'll have to work something out. They're so noise canceling that my own voice reverberates so loud through them. Sound quality is nice though. This one didn't give me so much trouble on 5, and then when we tried it again on 9, it still didn't give me like loads of trouble. It went down pretty fast, but like it was one of those fights where the second you let it get a chance to attack, it's like, oh wait, this thing does damage. It was one of the bosses also for sure where there are like a lot of gimmicks going on. It's like, oh, it throws a bomb at you, try and deflect these back. Oh, there are these mirrors that show up, and I did not interface with any of that, but it was, which is probably part of why it took me a bit of doing. And for my build, for sure, smaller targets were always the worst, because my main source of damage was the spread fire thing, so it basically was a guarantee that unless I was right in their face, I'd be missing like half the shots. So even though I don't think we died on her at all, and we didn't really we came a bit close on the 9th run. I think we were at like no health by the end. She's also reasonably long lasting. It didn't take us too long, but most of the bosses didn't, and in comparison to some of the other bosses, she does have like 3 phases. She starts as the ball of fire, then she gets up as Amazon Pandora, pretends to die as Amazon Pandora, then gets back up, and there's bombs and mirrors, and there are a lot of attacks going out, and there's confusing attack patterns. So I think this was one of the harder ones, I would say. So I'm gonna put her in A tier, just about the sickest thing I've ever heard. Next is Empiron. This is the one where you're on the platform sort of going around him and you have to shoot all the different like force field generators, and then you shoot him in the middle. It was also another one where they were like, hey, have this gimmick you've never seen before. Well, you'd seen it like once earlier in that very mission, if I'm not mistaken. But it was one of those things where they give you a trampoline and they're like, now jump over the attacks. And you're like, I don't know what the timing of the trampoline is, how high this one will send me, and how long it'll take me to fall back on the ground, nor do I know how long the attack sticks around, so I don't know when to time this. And they're like, just time it. But it didn't. Most of his attacks didn't do much damage, and aside from the things where they wanted you to jump over something with the trampoline, most of his attacks were pretty telegraphed and easy to dodge. So I'm gonna put him in B tier. Could really put a hurt on someone, specifically if you didn't time to dodge well. The Chaos Kid, a hardy little bugger and runs around super fast. I don't remember how easy it was to lure it into the electro traps. I basically ignored that part of the fight, but it doesn't do a whole lot to hurt you. Like, it mostly tries to run away. When it does hurt though, I mean it adds up considering how long it lasts, since it's very evasive. So dude, I don't know how people record these super muffling headphones. My previous pair was only like $20, but it sounded all right, and it was because of its shoddy construction. The earphones didn't like cover my ears all the way, so I could hear myself. Anyway, sorry, Chaos Skin. I'm gonna put that in B tier also. Below Empiron, that feels right, yeah. I'm gonna try and keep them ranked within the tiers as well. Pretty fast and can hurt you a fair bit if you're not taking it out quickly, but because it focuses on running away more than trying to kill you, if you're trying to focus on killing it, usually you will have a good time. The Chariot Master! Once again, for reasons of the actually controlling the chariot and being in the space with the chariot is very confusing and sudden. I found this one pretty tough. You can still dodge on the chariot at least, like in place, but there are sometimes streams of bullets that come by fast enough that you can't hope to dodge through all of them if you're not steering the chariot right. And most of the attacks were also pretty fast. It doesn't have loads and loads of health, and being that he's like on a racetrack, he doesn't really like try to dodge your attacks. So he's much more offensive than defensive, but I'll put him in A tier below Amazon Pandora. Dark Pit, as per Chapter 6, when you fight him like 4 times. This one's pretty tough. partially because he swaps weapons every time, so he swaps playstyles, but you're stuck with the one per battle. So it's like you start at, well, in our case, it was like you fight him first in the ruins under the ground, and then you fight him up on the mountain where he's got a sniper, and then you have to fight him in the altar where he's kind of running around with a cannon, launching things and then getting around the altar so you can't hit him. And then the final battle with him up on the platforms, which was maybe the easiest of the fights I found with him. Well, maybe not quite. He has a lot of powerful attacks in that final phase, but he's also got nowhere to hide, unlike in the ruins where he can hide behind the pillars, the altar where he can hide around the altar, and the mountain where he's hiding the entire time. The main trick, I'm counting Dark Pit in Chapter 6 as one big multi-stage boss fight, and it was tough, largely because he changes tactics and you're not allowed to. So I think A tier is fair, maybe above Chariot Master. I think I did struggle on that one. That mission took us like 4 or 5 tries at the time, and I only got through in the end because I was like, screw this, upper dash arm, take him out in 2 hits. And that final boss phase of the boss fight, up in the sky, he has some really powerful moves that will just decimate your health bar, like the one where he like shoots a volley onto the entire platform. Mostly it's pretty dodgeable stuff, except for that one, and that one you have like basically no time to react to it, particularly I think maybe it's even less time on the harder difficulties, don't quote me on that. So if you don't get off that platform, it's like your whole health bar's going. But yeah, that was a gruesome one. He's a small target, he's fast as you are, he tries to dodge stuff as well. Yeah, that was another thing, is some of these boss fights have are capable of dodging you, and at that point it's completely random whether they dodge you or not, I think. So it's just like 70% of the time you try and shoot them, they will not get hit. And moving on to Dark Pit and the control center in Chapter 13 of the Lunar Sanctum, that's going to be an S tier easily for me. That was probably the hardest fight in the game for me personally. Again, because he's so quick and nimble, and you have to be like spread firing him, and because it wasn't as short a mission as Chapter 6, I didn't feel comfortable being like, screw it, I'll just bring out the upper dash arm and chase him down, because then I would have to use the upper dash arm for the rest of the map, which I was not at all going to do. But the trick is, it wasn't just about, it's so hard because he's got all these he's got charge shots, and he's got normal shots, and if I have homing turned off, he sure doesn't. So all his shots home in on me, so you basically are forced to dodge. It's unlikely that you're gonna... Well, even with my claws, I was moving pretty fast, so you can outrun some of it, but not long enough that your stamina will hold out. So you really do have to be pretty sharp with your dodging and responding with charge attacks and stuff. For my build in particular, it was tough because charge attacks go fast, and they seem to be one of the better ways to hit him with big damage, especially after you like dodge something or he's about to shoot something. But charge attacks were not where my main source of damage was. Mine was the spread fire. So it took a very long time, and I was lucky that I had the particular set of artillery claws with the confusion on them, because that did give us a bunch of free shots on him when that happened. But the main trick of this is you have to be really careful where you shoot, because there's a big old control center in the middle where if you shoot it, it shoots a bomb at you. And you are trying to take it down eventually, but shooting it accidentally while you're trying to focus on dodging Dark Pit stuff was mucho confusing, and that's why it was one of my favorite bosses, probably my favorite boss in the game. The fact that you had to actually use it as cover, and if he shot it as well, it shot him back, so you could trick him into shooting it if you kind of played him and like roll around the other side of the control center. So I like that quite a bit. One of the most fun bosses in the game, and also probably the hardest for me personally. That was the one where I died like 5 or 6 times on that one, right? Probably the most that we've died on any of the bosses. Not the most I died on any of the levels, but the bosses. Moving on to Goddess Palutena as possessed by the Chaoskin in Chapter 21? No, 20. Chapter 20, I'm pretty sure. I would put this in D tier because it actually goes by really fast. The Chaoskin doesn't have that much health, and you can just bring it down almost before Palutena does anything. But I'm bumping up to the C tier, hungry for a hot plate of punishment, because Viridi is really, really, really slow to mention that you're not supposed to shoot Palutena after you just had a mission where Magnus was all like, we shouldn't hit Perk Pit's body too bad, and then you beat him up with a club and he's fine. So it's like, obviously I'm not going to assume that the next time they tell me, make sure not to hurt her, that they actually mean it, because they didn't a minute ago. So C tier for Viridi's really, really shoddy executive action, basically. But yeah, she's got laser beams, she can blind you and stuff, but like, so you see so few of those attacks when you bring down the Chaoskin fast enough. And I didn't even really have a precision weapon, right? I've got my silly spread fire, and it's still, even though I was missing like 80% of the shots, still brought it down quickly. It flies, I think it can hide behind Lady Palutena, but for the most part it flies above her such that it's easy to shoot it without shooting her. Not so bad. Oh, I shouldn't have this one here. This was just my stand-in for Amazon Pandora before I found an actual good picture, so let's ignore this one. Pit's body, also in Chapter 20, oh no, this is in Chapter 18, Ring of Chaos. A difficult one for me because it's in the mission where you're playing as Magnus, so suddenly me, who's used to a ranged build, is forced to play a melee build and all hell breaks loose, basically. He mostly attacks, he's kind of like Dark Pit where he attacks with like little volleys and then a charge shot here and there. Reasonably hardy. Well, no, not all that hardy, and you can knock him around pretty easily with Magnus's massive F-off club. I hear that he can do a lot of damage if you give him an opening, and fortunately, I didn't have too much trouble with that. But also, it's a mission where your powers are disabled because you're playing as Magnus, and Pit's body has all your powers. You've got no god backing you, so you're basically on your own there, so it is a bit of an endurance in the sense that if all the health you had at the beginning is the health you're getting. But for the most part, it's you just whack him a bunch and flick the stick when he looks like he's about to shoot. So I'll put him in C tier, Hunger for a Hot Plate Punishment for us. I'll put him above the Chaos Skin Palutena, though. Next one is Magnus and Gowl, the partner boss battle, which I found a bit different from the actual boss fight with Gowl. I think Gowl in the duo boss fight was a little less aggressive because they didn't want to like overwhelm you with Magnus as well. That said, Magnus didn't seem to do a whole lot because he kind of is trying to get close to you. It seemed more like he was kind of hanging around Gowl, and if I had tried to get close to her, he would have hit me more, but mostly he was just kind of dodging and ducking and weaving and then getting knocked back when I shot him. Did he even hit us once during any of that? I'm not certain he did. So Magnus didn't really shake up the boss fight a whole much, and then Gowl was a bit easier for it, was kind of how I felt. So I think I'm comfortable going C tier with this one as well. Some of Gowl's attacks were still a bit strenuous. Like, she has a bunch of like projectile attacks that go like 1, 2, 3, and then like they kind of like converge on you, and there's the black hole thing I don't think she did in this one, nor did she do the reflecting shield, so she had a bunch of her moves nerfed, it seemed. Wasn't so bad. I think I'll go C tier above Pit's body, though. Well, no, below Pit's body. I'm kind of operating on a bit of guesswork there because I don't remember her using a whole lot of big variety of moves. I remember her using like 1 or 2, and Magnus barely doing anything. As for Pandora, the first time you fight her is, I think it's a piece of cake. She has so little health that she goes down so fast you barely have to see her do anything. And then in the second phase, you have Dark Pit helping you, so it's like, basically. Next up is the Soul Eating Monster. Now, it's an air battle boss fight, all of which are harder for me personally. But this one, as they go, wasn't too bad. You can take out all of its weak points are also what is firing at you, so every time you do damage to it, it gets a little easier to avoid, basically. So that basically means, like, at the beginning, it's quite hard. There are a lot of things shooting at you at once, and they converge on you from different locations, so just wheeling around in a circle isn't really good enough. It requires a lot of, like, sort of corkscrewies and figure eights to kind of get around, but it doesn't take too much to go down, and like I said, as you damage it, it loses offensive capability, so I think I'll put it at the bottom of B tier. It could really put a hurt on someone. I think if the fight were longer, it would put more of a hurt on someone. So if provided you're missing a lot, it gets a lot harder, I suppose. So it's kind of a bit of a high stakesy kind of one in that way. The Phoenix, so its attack patterns are really weird compared to the rest of the game's bosses in that it sort of is much more slow and deliberate with everything. It feels like a Zelda boss kind of, but the fights aren't. So the attacks aren't nothing to avoid. The one where it sort of dive bombs you, you can kind of duck through it, and then there's another one where it's kind of breathes fire across the whole ground, so you use the trampoline. So it's like both of its moves are a little unusual to avoid. They're not really something you can kind of just instinctively go through. You kind of have to actually think about it, and it's got a fair bit of health on it. Mercifully, it's a big target, so those are easier for me to take down because my spread fire means every shot hits. I think it's probably worth the top of B tier. I don't know why RM won't go down. Okay. We're at the top of B tier because it's just a little unusual and makes you think in a way that most of the other fights do not. Not that the other fights don't make you think, but it makes you think in a way that you're not sort of prone to, I didn't feel used to at that time in the game anyway. Next is the reset bomb that's ejected at the start of chapter 12, the air battle for chapter 12, I think, where you just have to kind of shoot it down. There are like 2 enemies hanging around you that make it slightly annoying, especially the ones that shoot you after the screen fades to white. But other than that, it's basically just target practice. Just shoot the green thing. I think it's still even a little harder than Pandora partially because the monsters that dealing damage to you has impact on you for the rest of that air battle, and partially because the screen is shaking a lot. So it's not like the easiest thing to shoot all 5 single-digit number of the green things, but it's not the hardest thing. It's pretty easy, but it's not like you can do it without thinking anyway. Next is the Space Kraken. As we learned twice, this thing does a stupid quantity of damage, but it also has very little health, and the tentacles you can more or less take down before they shoot anything, and the face, usually I found I was able to take it out after it had done its first attack. So as long as you can tank 1 attack, which we were able to, it basically can't do too much to you. I'm gonna bump it up to the bottom of C tier rather than D tier though, because I did feel like I needed, the second time, once I knew I was going to be fighting it again in Chapter 24, I was a bit like, Okay, now that I know what it's capable of, I do have to plan ahead for this a little bit, and even though my plan completely failed, basically, and I ran out of breath and then everything was bad, I still won without much incident. I felt like an idiot, but basically everything that could go wrong with my plan went wrong and I was fine, so I don't consider it one of the harder fights. Thanatos. Yeah, Thanatos was hard. First of all, he's got multiple phases that all change the rules a little bit. He's pretty fast, so like in the foot phase, in the swords phase, and the phase where he's in the jar and the skulls are coming after you. All those are attacks that are moving very fast. He's got a lot of attacks that put status effects on you, like the shortening health one and the spinning around one and the paralysis and poison. I think he did all 4 of those. The skulls one is impossible to hit the skulls back without them hurting you. Sometimes you'll knock it back at them and they hurt you anyway. Also, it was ill-explained that... I still don't even remember what it was. Was it that the red ones you can't knock back, they just explode, and the white ones you're supposed to knock back? I don't know, it's just a lot coming at you. And then even with my claws, I think I had the claws at that point, right? Yeah, surely I did. I couldn't outrun like the foot phase nor the swords phase. I basically had to dodge them pretty well or bring them down so fast that it wasn't an issue. That one took us a few goes, I think, and it was pretty tough. I think it's bottom of S tier, the top of my to kill list. He's at the bottom of the top of my to kill list. I sure struggled with him. Cragalanche Crush! Cragalanche ain't so bad. He was a really fun boss. Most of his attacks are very big and telegraphed, so they're not too hard to dodge, but because he's tanky from the front especially, and they kind of are like nudging you like, yeah, bet you probably want to attack him from the back, don't you? Yeah. So it's like, yeah, the attacks are easy to dodge, but now I'm also trying to do 2 other things, which is like shoot him a little bit here and there to make sure I'm doing constant damage, but also try and circle around to the back. And eventually I gave up and said, screw it, I'm gonna have a better time if I just engage him head on, so I don't have to try and like run around him, because he also moves pretty fast for a big rock. Tears across the stage quickly and stuff. Doesn't do too much damage though, as I recall, even if you do get hit. So the attacks aren't too hard to dodge, don't do too much damage, so you have to be messing up a lot in a row for it to be a real problem, but I would still put it bottom of B tier, I think. Just below the soul-eating monster. Just above the soul-eating monster feels right. Wasn't too rough for us, anyway. But I think it was one of the few... not too many of these bosses actually killed me at any point. It was usually the levels beforehand that killed me, if anything. But I'm pretty sure Cragalanche did. Next up is Pseudo-Palutena, who we fought just before the Magnus and Gal duo. And it's basically the same moves as the possessed Palutena fight, except you actually have to hit her and not the Chaoskin, and she has way more health than that little Chaoskin did, so probably she's just above... Yeah, I think I'll put her just above Pit's body, because in C tier, because don't think we died on her at any point, but she really did a number on us, especially as she comes right after the Magnus and Gal fight, and she's actually, her patterns are a bit like Gal's, where there are a lot of like projectiles that kind of cooperate to meld with each other and chase you down. And I think she maybe also had a shield at some point. There was a lot of weird stuff she had. Nothing was really straightforward about that fight. And she sort of, I don't think she really dodged in the same way that like Magnus and Dark Pit do, but she like moved around quickly in patterns that weren't really obvious, especially with all the other projectiles on screen, so it was a bit tricky, but I don't think it was quite B tier status. The RM Brain, don't think it actually even fights back, does it? So probably that's below even Pandora. It doesn't, I don't think it shoots you at all. You just kind of shoot it, and then you win. The RM Generator. Now this is an interesting one where it's like, so there's these panels revolving around the weak spot of the generator. The floor occasionally like gets electrified, and there are a few bads around shooting guns at you and stuff, so it's a lot to keep track of. But not unlike Cragalanche, it's like a lot of stuff, but doesn't actually do too much damage to you if it hits you, if I recall. And the boss itself was had less health than Cragalanche, I would have said, so it goes down pretty quick. And you don't have to worry too much about all that stuff if you're being highly offensive. So I would put it somewhere in the middle of C tier here, right between Pit's body and Gal Magnus seems right. Gal Magnus was certainly a longer, sort of more focus requiring fight, but I think easier because it didn't attack you quite as much as this thing did, where there's an attack every 2 seconds. The Hades Heart, surprisingly a tougher one, because not only does it chase you around and have a clone of itself that explodes, which, you know, is generally a hard thing to deal with, but it gets periods of invincibility every time you do a chunk of damage, and then just goes sprinting around the whole place. So you basically it basically is like a 10-phase boss fight, where every phase change, you're vulnerable for like 20 seconds while it gets its anger out. So I would put it in A tier, probably above Amazon Pandora. We didn't die at any point, but I used like nearly all my skills protecting myself. Like my powers. Not all of them, but nearly all of them. And it didn't help that Pit was trying to explain philosophical implications of soul recycling the whole time. Next is the RM Core, I think this one was called. And this is the one where you're on the rails sort of flying all around it, and then Hiram's all like, "Oh, set it on fire!" And it doesn't appear to do anything, and he's like, "Well, peace out!" And Pit has that line where he's like, "What an idiot," or whatever he says. You're supposed to swap the rails to evade its fire. I didn't because I couldn't see the rails, and it turned out fine anyway. I just laid into it with rapid fire, and I got hit by a few things. It wasn't enough to kill me, so it's not a very offensive boss fight. It's more for like the fun of, you're sliding around on rails. So I think probably bottom of C tier works, because I think there would still be danger if you weren't laying into it with like a 5-star ranged weapon like I was. But it's slow enough that it's not like D tier where I barely had to think about these ones. I was like trying my best to like sort of shoot down missiles and target it, but it doesn't pose a lot of threat if you're focusing on it and have a decent weapon, is my impression. The Underworld Guardian. This is a tough boss. I never once actually managed to bring it down. I always had to have Dark Pit bail me out, even on difficulty 5, I think. It's got a ton of guns. It's got these silly ring lasers that come at you, which are really hard to avoid because they require precision to get through them. And when you're flying, you kind of drift. You don't really like move in and stop. Like, it's not very like precise in that way. So the hoop lasers are tough. It's got all these different kinds of guns that cooperate at the same time. So you're like trying to bring down the gun that annoys you the most, basically. It's got some there's the hoops that kind of go straight, but they cover a large area because they're large. There's the force field things. I think there were those where they're sort of square, like reflective panels that absorb your bullets and prevent you from shooting the guns. There's the one that shoots like a barrage of fireballs in every direction that's kind of hard to dodge, and all of them cooperating together was just a bit of a mess. So it's at least A tier, and I think probably the top of A tier. I think it was more than Hades hard, because I think I died like 2 or 3 times on you here. Maybe even bottom of S tier, but I'm on the fence about that one, so I'll leave you there for the minute. The reset bomb pod is a bit of a tough one. It goes down pretty quickly, but it's a bit difficult to wrap your head around punching the guards into the trench that it explodes and then the shell comes off, and then swapping from that tactic to immediately shooting the reset bomb pod. So it's a bit of a juggling one. Mercifully, their attack patterns are pretty limited. Of the 4 guards, I mean, they don't really cooperate to like box you in or anything. They kind of take turns and stuff. And their shots are pretty normal amounts of damage and don't track you too hard or anything. It's more of the boss fight where like the battle's up here and just trying to keep your head on straight. I think I'll put it just below Amazon. Oh, below Dark Pit? Yeah, that seems right. Not technically a really hard one, but it's the kind of thing where if you're not, once you panic, you're dead, basically. Next up is Hudraw, as per the air battle in Chapter 3. This one's pretty tough. They don't have loads of health, but it's not an insubstantial amount, and they have a bunch of attacks that are like the lasers that sort of cross the screen, and they kind of like, it'll go left to right, and so you're like, okay, that's probably in the middle of the screen, I should be above or below that, but the actual angle will be more like a curve, and it's really hard to get a grip on like when you see them firing a laser, what part of the screen is actually touched by that. But it's still B tier because they're not too hard to survive through, really, as much as it is just hard to not get hit at all, I would say. You really want to be saving your air attacks for those. Below the Phoenix and above Arum Pyron feels kind of right. Maybe just below Arum Pyron, because I felt like, no, above it. I didn't die on either, I don't think, and I took more damage on Arum Pyron probably, but maybe I did die on Air Hudraw one time or another. I don't know, that was a long time ago.
What? I'm losing my brain!
I am done. Finished is the word they actually use. I don't live in the past, I live for the now, alright? Who knows what dragons did or did not kill us at what points. Next up would be the Great Reaper. A bit of a weird one. I think I learned after the fact that you can actually shoot its toes, but I thought you had to shoot it in the face, so that affected my perception of the fight a little bit. It is not a super offensive battle. It's got that one big laser beam that it comes out of its face. Does that only come out of its face when you get down to the second phase where it's like there's a shining light on its forehead you have to shoot? I cannot remember, but it's definitely like a glass cannon kind of fight where if it hits one shot on you, oh no, but most of its shots are little and easy to dodge. But that one big laser is its really signature move that's kind of tough. And it's got a fair bit of health, and it's also kind of hard to hit the vital point once it does go down to the weak point mode. I think I would call it somewhere in the middle of C tier, probably above the generator feels right. It's got a bit of challenge to it, but it's very contingent upon what moves it does and stuff. If it doesn't use the huge laser too much, you're probably going to be alright, basically. Next up is the Great Sacred Treasures. This fight was such a blur, but I think it was probably the only fight, maybe the only point at all in the game where I used absolutely every single power in my toolbar and still ended up with like that much health at the end. It's got a lot of hard-hitting attacks. It's got a bit where it destroys half the stage. It circles around the outside, so you can't really get in close if close is your preferred style of fighting, or it's not as easy as with some other bosses. It deals wicked damage It can paralyze you and stuff at a certain point. I think it gives you a few status effects. I think it's probably A tier material. I didn't have all that much trouble with it, really, in the end, literally speaking, in terms of like I was panicking hard because I was using all my powers, and I guess if I used more powers than with other bosses, it probably is worse. I don't think it was quite as bad as Dark Pit, though. We never did die to this thing. I died to Dark Pit. Like, I died on different phases. I think I died like twice in that mission, at least. Didn't die at all in the Great Secret Treasure. Granted, I had a better weapon by the time I got to Great Secret Treasure, but still. It's got a lot of ways of attacking you, but hitting it is reasonably straightforward. It's just a little difficult because it flies away from you, but it's not hard to understand what to do. It's just hard to execute. Twin Bellows has got a fair bit of health, so particularly if you're fighting it early on, it's a bit of a grueling one, and I think it was a bold choice to start with because it's a tough boss to dodge. Like, most of its attacks are awkward to dodge. It's got a damage over time breath of fire attacks, which it sits there for like a second and a half, so it's not like one dodge will get you out of it. It's like you have to chain dodge, dodge, dodge if you want to get out away from that. Fireballs that come in in volleys of 3. It's got the worst attack that it does, which is flies along the ground at you. You know, in Smash Bros. Melee, when Bowser sprints, he doesn't run, he just kind of like flies across the ground, sparks flying everywhere. It does that, and it can, I think, randomly chain anywhere from like 2 to 6 of those. So just in this first level where you've been playing the game for like 5 minutes, the game is like, I hope you're an expert at strafing, dodging, charge shots, and managing your stamina. It's a whole hell of a lot. In hindsight, it's not too difficult, but it's still got a fair bit of health. And it's a major test of a lot of your dodging capabilities, so I think it's worth like top of B tier. Did we get it on our first try on 9? It seems unlikely. I doubt we did. Ah! Bugger. Considering I would have only had like a starting game weapon at that point. I think it was a very tough boss fight to have as boss number 1. If it were up to me, boss number 1 would have been like Pandora. That seems like a more fair challenge level. Pandora or Great Reaper or someone. Or something like the generator. As for Dark Lord Gal by herself, again, this is my view is colored somewhat by the fact that this was an earlier game boss, but she's a small target. She's got like 20 different projectiles. She's got the black hole that sucks you towards it, so it's harder for you to dodge. She's got like little blue shots. She's got a force field where if you shoot her, it shoots back this huge purple blast. She's got a giant laser beam. She's got a dashing melee attack. She summons minions in the middle of it. There's a lot going on in this boss fight. I think it's A tier material, you know? When she's by herself, there's a lot going on there. Maybe even just above Chariot Master. I never really felt when I was doing that fight that I found a strategy that was a strategy or a weapon that was like ideal. I always felt like she had something to counter me. If I was doing the sniping, I had to wait for the shield to be, because I tried with the flintlock staff. Did I even beat it with flintlock staff at some point? I don't know. I was missing every shot. When I didn't miss, I usually hit her shield. So I was like, alright, screw it, I'll try melee. She's got so many projectiles that melee is really inadvisable, and not to mention the minions will creep up on you if you do that. If you try and go mid-range, you have to deal with the minions and her projectile and like the laser and stuff, and always be ready for to dodge melee. It's like she's got a counter for everything, is how it feels. A very tough boss indeed. Phosphor was an interesting one. Again, small targets, that's bad for me. Most of her moves I felt like were pretty easy to dodge conceptually, but there's a lot of moving around you need to do in order for to be sure you're not getting hit. So it was very much a fight where you ran out of stamina a lot, and I should have been using Tireless more. I think I was maybe still in the days where I only had one use of Tireless, so I was like, no, I must save it. Like an idiot. Kind of like Palutena, where she's got a bunch of attacks that like shoot out of the ground and then some that sort of converge on you. Another boss with a lot of cooperating things. The real kicker with her, I think, was that basically all of her attacks did paralysis. So if you got hit, it wasn't just like, oh no, I'm gonna be in hit stun for a little bit and take a quarter damage. It's like, yeah, and you also won't be able to shoot her for like 10 seconds. So you better not get hit, but not too much damage, reasonably easy to dodge, so it's another kind of high stakes fight. If you get hit, the boss gets harder by a country mile, basically. I think top of B tier seems appropriate there. It wasn't quite like the outright confusion and I don't know how to get away from stuff that Chariot Master did for me. But she was one tough cookie. A tough biscuit of many varieties, actually. Medusa, the big final battle with her in chapter 9. Well, it is the final battle with her, I suppose. That you do, anyway. Pretty tough one. It's, again, an all-air battle, so I was really hanging on for dear life through most of it. I don't think I died on it, but I went into crisis mode, like, twice on the chapter 9 thing, and, like, I went into crisis mode and then got hit by, like, 2-3 projectiles, so I was just like, it's over, it's done, I'm dead. And that's, of course, after this huge half-hour mission where your, like, nerves are already fried and you've done, like, 6 boss fights, so it's, like, an imposing fight as well. It's definitely top of A tier. I'm just trying to figure out if it's below or above the Guardian. I think probably below, because it's kind of all flying around. They're a little more gentle with the attack patterns. She has a lot of attacks, and so you're kind of trying to get used to, oh, okay, her hand spits poison now, okay, and now she ducks, okay, her head's come off, oh, now she's flying me, okay, these projectiles that kind of cross each other, okay, these are things that are coming. There's bombs I'm supposed to shoot, no, I'm not supposed to shoot them. It's a lot to keep in mind, but it's, I don't think it was quite the cooperation of bastardly patterns that the gun guardian, underworld gatekeeper, there it is, found it, was. But it's also a long boss fight. She's got like 5 phases. It's all air battle. She's such a large figure that, like, if she does like a swipe, it'll be like 85% of the screens. There's one little pocket you're supposed to sit in, which then means that all of her projectiles then go for that pocket and you have to quickly get out of there. And I never ever mastered the air dodge thing. So it was a tough one for me for sure, because it was all air battle, basically. You know, I think I'm gonna bump Underworld Gatekeeper to bottom of S tier. That one was friggin' hard. And it feels kind of right that Medusa should be top of A tier. Next is Hudraw Reborn. This is the final fight of chapter 3, where it's kind of like a serpent that comes out of the lake. This one's pretty easy. It's got a fair number of attacks, and it's got that weird gimmick where partway through you have to shoot the orange thing to get it to fall in the water and jump out, and it comes flying out of the water and then lands on the ground. I don't think... Well, the trick with that was that I couldn't really tell when I was supposed to shoot the orange ball. Like, I think you're supposed to shoot it so it goes straight down into him, but I didn't really get it, so I just kind of started shooting them until it worked. But he's not got much health. Usually 1 or 2 volleys of getting him out of onto the land will do it. Big target, so he's easy to hit. Most of his attacks are, because he's so far away in the lake, you can sort of see them coming and give it a lot of time to dodge. Of course, some of the attacks would like clip through the ground, and so you wouldn't be able to see them until it was too late, which made it just a little bit harder than D tier, I would say. I think it would be bottom of C tier for me. Well, I know it's a little harder than the... Was it? No, I think it was easier than the core, because with the core I had to do a bit more focusing. With this one, it was basically just like stand there at the front of the lake and shoot it till the orange balls show up, and then just sort of duck the little attacks that do come your way. Super cool boss fight, though. I love the locale of that. I almost, part of me wonders if it was meant to be a callback, because of Kid Icarus and Super Smash Bros. Have such a linked history. It's a lot like the fight, like thematically, a lot like the fight with Rayquaza at the lake in Smash Brawl. I mean, you got 2 different things that shoot lasers out of their mouths and come out of a lake to hit you, and then you sort of smack them and they kind of tumble around all everywhere and sort of flopping around. Anyway, Hudraw Head. This is the bit where it's the mid-boss of Chapter 3, where you've taken them down to the sky, and then Lady Palutena douses you in monster pheromones, and this thing tries to romance and or destroy you in a very confusing and upsetting turn of events. It's pretty hard. It thrashes all about. There are other enemies in the thing. It comes after you and shoots projectiles, so you can't just dodge one thing. Like, it's melee attacking and projectile attacking, like, at the same time. It thrashes around so much that it's hard to get a beat on what precisely it's trying to do at any given moment. It's got a fair bit of health. It's just, like, a very solid and imposing enemy. I think even maybe worth bottom of A tier. Maybe even above Chariot Master. I don't know that I ever died to it, but, like, it wounded me dearly, and then I was like very in ill health for the next bit. Now I was like, I need this freaking cantaloupe from inside this rotating tile. I was very desperate at that point. Basically, after every fight encounter with this thing, I remember being like, yeah, I think I maybe did die once on it, didn't I? Anyway, next up is Hades, the final fight of the game. It's, again, a big air battle, with a multi-stage air battle like Medusa. And it was hard. I died several times on it, but I'm not sure I think Medusa was probably technically a bit harder. Hades has that one bit in the middle where you're trying to shoot, like, the disc off his chest, and he's got these 2 things that are shooting, like, laser beams, and then a bunch of things that are shooting little projectiles at you, and then a few things that are shooting large projectiles at you, and you can't destroy them such that you can get back to doing your circle motion, because they come back immediately. So you kind of have to do, like, this crescent moon and then zigzag through the middle to dodge everything, and you're kind of, like, trying to get yourself into the idea of doing that when you've been doing the circle the whole game is a bit of a mind melter. But most of his phases aren't actually, it's just like a bit of memorization and familiarity with the boss goes a long way. Less difficult and more just, there's so much of it that you have to do that if you're getting hit, you know, a little bit each time, that's gonna add up. He's probably about on par with Medusa. I think she would have been a little harder in the end, probably. I remember, like, I remember when I beat Hades, I was like, oh, okay, we did it. And when I beat Medusa, I was like, oh, I launched the shot. Is that it? Did we do it? I should let go of the control, because I have no idea. like, I got that, like, adrenaline running, you can feel the adrenaline actually coming out of your heart and spreading cold across your whole body, and I was like trembling and like, is this the real life or is it just fantasy? Hades was a bit less, it was a bit less of that. It was and a bit more of just like, okay, we're doing this now, okay, I gotta tune my brain to this now, okay, we're doing this now. He's got all these different guns, all these different this, all these different that, fair bit of health. A lot to keep track of, a lot to remember for next time. Last but not least is our dear Arlon the Serene. And you obviously know this is going in S tier. I'm gonna put it one below Thanatos, I think. Once again, a fight from chapter 13 and one of my favorite fights in the game. Bloody hard. He goes in, so putting the whole room dark actually does make it very hard to shoot him, as it turns out. So you basically have to wait for him to attack to get a good sense of where he is, because that's where how you figure it out is see what direction his bullets are coming from, which very much puts an interesting pacing to the fight in that he kind of controls the pacing. He's got a lot of health. He's hard to hit with, he's a small target boss, so that's already bad for me because it means it's hard to hit him. Mercifully though, my spread fire, I only had to be kind of accurate in where he was, but he's got a lot of health. He did have a fair number of projectiles, but I remember feeling like the tactic for most of them was the same. Like most of them are those projectiles that kind of go slow and then fast. So even though they all looked different, did different amounts of damage and were different sizes, the dodging was mostly the same for each of them, but it was such a long fight, and doing it in the dark, and then because you were never sure if he was moving closer to you, you were doing a lot of running around, so another boss where you're running out of stamina a lot. Very much an endurance, very much a fight where you're not in control, and just a good one all around. It was grim and kind of awesome. And would you look at that? We just did all of them! There we go, that's the end of the tier list. So here's my tier list. We've got, from top to bottom, Dark Pit plus the Control Center, Thanatos, Arlon, Underworld Gatekeeper, Medusa, Hades, Hades' Heart, Amazon Pandora, Dark Pit Chapter 6, Great Sacred Treasure, Reset Bomb Pod, Gal, Hugh Draw Head, Chariot Master, Phosphora, Twin Bellows, Immortal Phoenix, Hugh Draw Air, Arm Pyron, Chaoskin, Kragalanche, Soul Eating Monster, Pseudo Palutena, Pit's Body, Great Reaper, Arm Generator, Gallon Magnus, Lady Palutena the Chaoskin, Kraken, Arm Core, Hugh Draw Reborn, Reset Bomb, Pandora, Arm Brain. Woo! We did it! It's the first time I've ever done a tier list on this channel, isn't it? That's fun. Right, so I don't know what I'm gonna do about these headphones for future recordings. I might have to I might just have to use my earbuds to record from now on for a bit, because honestly, when I do this, it's like there's like a is all I can hear on my own voice. So that plus hearing the audio of what's going on is near deafening, just generally very hard to understand. Although I think I said the same thing about these other headphones when I had them first, so it may be that I'll break it in over time and get used to it. That's over now, though! So, I'd be very happy to hear if anything on this tier list surprised you, if you're like, really? You think that the Phoenix is harder than the Kraken? You're out of your noggin! So feel free to let me know if you disagreed with any of these, or if you found there was one or two where you're like, oh yeah, I'm absolutely agree, Arlon's the hardest boss in this game. I'd love to know your opinions. And that is all for now. Next video on the channel is going to be some more Wii Sports, and I was thinking that the next evening upload would again be something Kid Icarus related, just because I enjoy the game so much. I think I'll probably do a super cut of all of our 9 attempts. So basically, the successful attempt on every chapter, every difficulty 9 chapter we did, which was all of them. Except for the boss rush, I guess. But that was this. Man, look at all the fights we had to fight. A lot of them are kind of hard to compare and contrast because they play quite differently. I mean, it's quite hard to compare the Arm Core to Twin Bellows to Hades' Heart, for instance. All 3 of those fights just have such a different pacing and feel. But I did my best, and that's all. Next video on the channel is going to be some more Wii Sports. Maybe I already said that. Thank you so very much for coming around. Hopefully I'll see you around. Admiral's going to be out of here now. Peace! Counted. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, all those training missions really have this is the final course, right? So it is, as far as 5. I intend to go for this one. The wind isn't that strong, but by splicing either way.